Welcome to Stepping into Life. I'm here this morning with two of my good friends, David Pate, who's the Executive Director of the Family Counseling Center, and along with him is Susan Blackwood, licensed therapist and associate of David's. And we're here this morning, David, to talk about fear. And that's a subject I would guess in your profession and even in my life, all of our lives, there's always a conversation to be had around fear.
Fear is that dreaded four-letter word that most of us don't know how to really deal with. And when I go to people and say, okay, it sounds like you're fearful, they look at me like, oh, okay, am I scared or am I shaking? No, and let's understand, again, we've mentioned it before in an earlier series, but let me remind everybody what fear, how it is defined. Fear is defined as an agitated emotional reaction to impending pain or danger, which may be real or imagined. Fear can be rational or irrational, normal or abnormal. So what's the difference between a normal fear and an abnormal fear?
When it starts to become neurotic, it can start to lead to guilt, feelings of guilt and shame, and also I want to talk a little bit about stigma too with this virus. But talking about the guilt and the shame, we've probably all experienced this with just worrying about cold viruses, flu virus. Okay, just some scenarios. Well, Mother's Day was recently, Father's Day is coming up. We have special days like that. So you've got a hint of a sore throat. It's allergy season. But you want to visit your elderly mom or your elderly father for these special days. Or you might have another special occasion. Maybe you're going to a baby shower and feeling a little bit under the weather. You're not sick enough to really know you're sick, but there's this scratchy throat and you're thinking, okay, do I disappoint my mom or my dad by not going, or my friend by not going to her baby shower, or do I take a chance and go? And what if I have the dreaded coronavirus and I get my elderly parents sick, or I get my friend sick who's expecting a baby? And then you have all these feelings of guilt. If you do decide to go and you don't want to disappoint them, then you may start to second guess yourself and think, oh no, what if I just gave my mom coronavirus? And it can almost become debilitating. That's when the fear becomes debilitating and it's a real problem.
Is that when you would define kind of going into a phobia, where it actually affects your normal life?
Yeah, well, phobia is regarding a specific
I hear a lot about phobias, so help us with that.
Yeah, it's, and again, some of this is a normal fear. It's the fear of, yes, getting sick and possibly dying. But it can become extreme, and again, it can become debilitating. And nothing is 100%. Yes, we take precautions. And I don't know that there's always a right or wrong answer. If you go to the baby shower or you stay home, you just make the best decision you can with the information you have.
So a phobia would keep you in home because something's bad, or fear would go out. Healthy fears, I take precautions. If I decide to go, let me take reasonable caution so I don't want it to possible infect a loved one.
I would think of a phobia, though, as more of something more specific. So suppose you did go to the baby shower and then your friend got sick and you blame yourself.
Okay.
You may or may not have given it to your friend. Your friend may have gotten it from somewhere else. But then you have a phobia of baby showers from that point on because you've made that association of,
Good point.
I may have gotten my friend sick. And then you're never able to enjoy a baby shower after that because you have that memory of your friend getting sick and thinking you were responsible. And, there are other examples. Maybe now we're starting to get back into public, going to restaurants. People are starting to go back to work. And so you may think, okay, I'm getting a scratchy throat. This is, Is one of the symptoms of coronavirus? It's not a major symptom. Maybe I don't have a fever. Fever, it's a little easier to decide. Okay, if you have a fever, you stay home.
Right.
But if you're feeling just kind of under the weather and you're not sure, is it allergies? Is it COVID-19? And you're thinking, do I go into work or do I not? If I don't go into work, maybe it looks like I'm slacking. I'm just lazy. But if I go into work, what if I get all my coworkers sick? And then you struggle with that. You second guess yourself. And these are things I think a lot of people are dealing with. And again, nothing is 100%. I don't know if there are really right or wrong answers. You just make the best decision you can with the information you have. There's a real danger, though, if it turns into shame. You feel like you've made the wrong decision. Guilt is more about the behavior, the act of doing something, whereas shame is more internalizing and it's about the person. Then you start thinking, I'm a bad person.
So you
I'm a
personalize
horrible
it.
person.
Yeah.
I'm selfish because I either decided to stay home or I decided to go. And then this is somewhat related, but getting off a little bit in a different subject too. There's stigma. I think a lot of people are afraid, okay, if I admit I'm sick, what if I do have the virus? What if I test positive? Then people won't want anything to do with me. They're going to think, you're contagious. You have this virus. And I think what's really sad is they may hesitate to get medical treatment or to get tested because of that fear, that stigma.
That's a really good point, Suzanne. Thank you for kind of pulling that together for us in how this is our lifestyle now. This is our culture has changed, and some people they even are fearful of change. And we've talked about you mentioned the restaurants and things, people starting to get out, going back to work. What about going back to church? That's been a big factor for some people. I want to be back, but should I go back?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'd like to maybe talk about or hear you guys talk about is the reality that all of us process this fear a little bit differently. And there's some fear in here I would expect from a clinical standpoint even is very, very healthy fear. There's some other fears that are more inclined to be destroying and harmful to the person themselves. But you asked about even our situation in the faith communities. Churches are going to begin opening doors and things of that nature, and we've chosen in our fellowship, our church, to do that here in the last week. And what we made very clear up front is that you've got to make your own conscious decision. There's still a lot of unknowns on the health concerns of the virus, the things of being able to return to society in a major way, and maybe what my conscience will enable me to do and be defensible in an intellectual capacity, at least maybe how I would look at it, may allow me to go back. Someone else, for all different kinds of reasons, Suzanne pointed out, may have a different type of fear or grounded in different facts because there's still a lot of unknowns. So we're seeing and encouraging people on the return to their physical faith-based things to take it maybe as quick as you can, because you want to come rushing back to the fellowship and social things and being together, but even then you've got to continue to probably respect, and I would say you need to respect the social distancing we're still being asked to do and things, because it's not about me and protecting me. It really becomes about protecting one another and trying to not add on or pile on to somebody else's fear.
And part of that is we're so used to fellowshipping in church. That is hugging, handshaking, close proximity contact. It's kind of foreign to us, at least in my mind, going to church and sitting so far away from each other, we don't really have any close personal contact. That's different. And we have to address those in our society. We now look on the floor in the stores, and you've got little squares that said, okay, social distancing, or we wear a mask. So there's things we have to get used to, and that still, when you see that, and you see people wearing a mask, it brings on that thought, uh-oh.
It's funny, and you know my wife Ann. Ann's the people person. I'm not. And in our first time back in worship here in recent days, and we no sooner got out of the car, and Ann rushed to a group of girls that she's been in Bible study with for a long period of time, and she was hugging them before I could pull her back, and I knew that I was fighting a pretty big line, a tough line, because of who she is and her heart, and these are young ladies she's seen anyway, but in that case, I was just trying to prevent her from the wrong display, even though she would be hugging these girls and had within the last few days at other places. But that's the challenge for someone that's really outgoing and like Ann, and just you need to have that physical connection. Me, not quite as much. I've changed over the years, but there's the battle that you're finding yourself in a worship setting, even finding yourself in a work setting where you want to connect with one another. And for many of us, there is a physical connection that needs to happen, and you feel like you're being robbed of that. So it puts you on an edge. It makes things a lot different, and I would think more stressful for the person that's high social, high I, as we might call them.
We got the four-letter word, fear, F-E-A-R. There's degrees in what's helpful, what's appropriate. I think how we handle those fears and understanding those. And I think in our next section, our next video, we're going to be talking more about how to handle those particular things, giving some ideas, and then talking about what people are doing now to address their fears. Some is positive, some they're not so positive. Suzanne, as you've seen in your practice for a long time, and it is a problem that I don't see people are taught very well from childhood. How do you handle fear? Fear is the dreaded four-letter word because we don't understand it. There's a healthy fear. Yes, we need to have some fear of some things, but an unhealthy fear is, like you said, when it goes too far, too intense, that tends to shut us down or going into shame and guilt.
So let me interrupt you for, I know
Sure.
we've got just a few minutes left in this segment, but so can my healthy fear be different than your healthy fear?
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
Suzanne's? So
Yes.
some of this has still got to be back to that individual makeup and situational, I guess, situations you're in terms of physical and relationships, as well as who you are.
Yes, absolutely. That's my understanding.
Oh, yes, certainly. I mean, and if you are within a vulnerable population, if you are elderly or, that's a good example. If you're elderly, there are a lot more reasons to be fearful. One, you're at risk with this disease because it could take your life more easily than someone who's younger. But also, there are a lot of scammers out there taking advantage of the elderly. They jump at opportunities like this. So it would make more sense for someone who's elderly to be afraid of these things than someone who's middle-aged, younger.
Fear lowers our ability to reason to some degree, and that's why scammers can take advantage of certain members of the population, whether they're older or not. So it covers everything. Fear is a major emotion humans have. We all have fear, we all have joy, we all have happiness at times. But when fear comes into a person's life and overtakes them, we tend to make decisions based on fear that can cause us great harm, both emotionally and physically. And in the next segment, I think we'll be talking more about that in the next segment.
Well, thanks for tuning in today, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon on one of our future episodes.